This week, Dr. Kelley Misata, founder and CEO of Sightline Security, is with us to discuss securing nonprofits. Then Keith Jarvis from SecureWorks joins us to talk about the latest cybercrime insights and observations. Finally, in the enterprise security news, more startups get funding to secure generative AI and LLMs. Broadcom celebrates the completion of its VMware acquisition with layoffs. Amazon's closest ChatGPT competitor, Q, is now available. Some interesting new open source security tools. Binance's founder pleads guilty. Securalytics COO pleads guilty. Hacking Team's founder arrested for attempted murder. Ransomware, and more ransomware. Ransomware is everywhere. All that and more on this episode of Enterprise Security Weekly.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly. Welcome to Enterprise Security Weekly and happy first anniversary to ChatGPT. This is episode 341, recorded on Thursday, November 30th, 2023. I'm your host, Adrian Sanabria, and I have COVID. And joining me is the Czar of Zero Trust, the captain of content, voted the second most likely host on this podcast to have 2024 predictions in draft form somewhere, Katie Teitler-Santullo. How are you, Katie?
I am well, and I fortunately do not have COVID. I'm sorry to hear that you do, Adrian.
Yeah, I might have to stifle some coughs while I'm on here, toggle the mute button a bit, but the symptoms are pretty light, so I should be able to make it through the podcast without retiring or perspiring too much.
Well, we'll do what we can. We're pretty scrappy on this show, so whatever we have to do, we'll do.
We had to do some scrapping to get things going here. It's technology is a guess at best. Just not Skype is not having its day today. Neither apparently is Discord. But yeah. So new hyphenated name there. Congrats.
Thank you. It's been a little bit, but yes. Indeed.
Well, it's the first I noticed you using it, so I made sure to change it in our system that we use that puts our names on the website and puts together the show notes and all that stuff. So I thought I'd change it in my script as well.
Why, thank you. Yes, it's there's just no way, despite how awful my my maiden name is, that I can ever get rid of it. Yeah, I'm published in too many places that if people start Googling me and they don't have my maiden name, then I'm SOL. So a very long hyphenated last name it is.
Yeah, it's a weird practice, right? It's kind of weird to get rid of like half your identity. So it's I like
more
it.
Like fun right now, It's a new thing. It's kind of fun. I'm not going to change it legally. I've heard of all the horror stories of women trying to change it, and my husband could care less what I do with my name, because we know who we are, we know what we did, and we know what we intend, so the government really doesn't need to, but heck, why not?
Yeah. My mother hyphenates her last name only for her career. She's an artist. And when she does anything as an artist, she hyphenates Stewart Sanabria, her last name. So it's.
Does she also have a longer first name?
Huh?
Does she have a longer first name?
Denise.
Okay, that's not too bad.
Yeah, it's not too bad, but Sanabria. So yeah, I'm sure you're going to have to. Well, I mean, if you didn't do it legally, you shouldn't have to spell it too often, right?
Right, yeah. I mean, and I don't write anything, but sometimes when I do write things, it, goes off the page.
Yeah, right. So do you have some predictions in draft form somewhere for 2024, and was ChatGPT used to help in producing those predictions?
So I don't have predictions. I've certainly been writing a lot, as I tend to do, and every once in a while, when I get stuck, I will go to ChatGPT and say, ask it a question, a prompt. My latest one was I asked it a question and I said, in sarcastic terms, because that's how I often write. And it gave me some really funny suggestions. And of course, that gets your mind off of the initial, what am I going to write? How am I going to write it? Am I going to make a point?
Right. The blank page.
And so
problem.
it sort of kickstarts what I find with ChatGPT more often than not, especially if you're trying to write something about a breach or an active exploit. There are disclaimers everywhere, like we don't cover this. This is illegal. If you're looking for cyber crime, we're not it. That kind of thing. But I think if I were to use ChatGPT instead of my own rating, it would be incredibly obvious. But I find that in the ideation phase, it helps spark some ideas. So it's a useful tool in that way. But for me, at least, it's not to the point of, hey, I'm going to give it a few prompts and let it do its thing, and that's what I'm going to put out there. I'm still writing all my own stuff. I still fact check it in various places because I know that between you, me, and Tyler, I'm the third wheel who is a little less excited about LLMs and AI. I'm still cautious about what it does, what it can do. There was just another story in the news. I don't know if we have it on our list today to cover, but about Sports Illustrated and a huge gaffe that they had with trying to pass off computer-generated text, as human written. So I'm not quite there yet, but I know it's
that's what BuzzFeed did, right? Didn't they lay off like all their journalists and just replace them all with AI generated content? I think it was BuzzFeed.
and there was something about them trying to pass it off as a human.
Right.
And that's like BuzzFeed uses it, but they're really upfront about how they use it and who wrote it. Like they have a name for their ChatGPT generation tool. I don't know if they're using ChatGPT or something else, but they notate that this was written by quote AI. They don't try to say, hey, this was human generated. They're very clear, and I think that's a good way to do it if you're going to experiment with it.
Interesting. So I hadn't even thought of that, like a future where AI journalists have muckrack profiles.
I'll try to find the article. Weird. I'll send it to you because it was interesting because there are companies who are using it, but they will have a special byline, and some of them have names and even profiles for their robot writers.
That's
so
weird.
They're still having fun with it and they're using it, but they're being very clear that this is what's going on.
Interesting. All right. Well, we got a bit of a late start and we need to get to our first interview. So quick announcement here. You can join our Discord channel to chat with our hosts, ask questions, customize live stream alerts, and more. Visit securityweekly.com/Discord to receive an invite. And I keep an eye on that during the recording, so you can blast stuff at me live, questions for whoever we're interviewing, and I'll do my best to pull it in if it's relevant. All right. For our first interview today, we're talking about securing nonprofits. We're excited to have Dr. Kelley Misata with us today. She's the founder and CEO of Sightline Security, a nonprofit that helps to secure other nonprofits. Kelley is the senior director of open source at Corelight and the president of OISF, but it was her PhD work that led her to found a nonprofit to look out for other nonprofits. Welcome to the show, Kelley.
Thanks, Adrian. It's great to be here.
Yeah, and great to have you. I met you. I helped you raise some money for Sightline a couple of years ago. Full disclosure here. I believe my memory isn't what it used to be, but I believe Helen Patton might have pointed me your way. I don't know if you know Helen.
You know,
Somebody recommended
I can't.
your charity.
Maybe it was Wendy Nather.
Wendy who?
Remember Wendy Nather?
Wendy Nather? I don't think it was. I mean, me and Wendy are good friends. But I do believe it was somebody within the Tinkerers. But
Awesome.
But yeah, I thought this was a
regardless,
really.
I'm excited.
Yeah. Somebody pointed us your way, and I looked into the organization. I love the idea of it. I do a lot of community and volunteer work myself. So it hit me right in the the mission oriented feels, and yeah, I've been wanting to get you on the podcast for a little while now. Glad you're here. So yeah, I mentioned in your intro that your PhD led you down this path. Maybe that's a good place to start. How did you choose your PhD, and what made you want to turn it into another business, that you have to run?
Yeah, exactly. Another hat to wear. It's a really weird tale, so I'm going to keep it super short. But I don't think that I chose this path. I think this path was chosen for me. I had some situations or a situation in my personal life that involved cyber stalking, and it went on for a number of years. And in that journey, I got the good fortune to meet some incredible people like Dr. Eugene Spafford, Becky Bass, and a number of other folks. And that is where I learned about the cybersecurity degree at Purdue University was from Spaff. And he said, "Why don't you apply?" And I did, but admittedly, I applied thinking that was going to be it, because why would they invite someone kind of later in their professional life to join a PhD program? And particularly someone who didn't have a technical background. I have a background in an MBA in marketing. So I entered the PhD program really in the mindset of, I'm just going to grab all the new information I can to be able to help me understand how cyber stalking works, how the technology facilitates people to be able to be anonymous and outside the reach of law enforcement. And it was really sort of in that mindset that I went on that journey and earned this PhD. But Sightline was formed out of it because when you come to the end of your PhD program, you of course have to do a dissertation. Many programs you have to do a dissertation, and I stepped back and started to think about what organizations did I reach out to for help when I was at my lowest, and they were nonprofits. And so it was a natural progression for me in my mind to say, okay, I want to start looking at, are nonprofits prepared to deal with a security event? And I was lucky enough that my PhD committee, when I proposed my initial thought, it was going to look at the entire spectrum of nonprofits. And my committee was wise enough to say, get the degree first and then go save the world, and not the reverse. So my PhD research actually focused on organizations working with victims of violence, because they had a sense of what security and urgency and crisis was like. I thought maybe the cybersecurity element would resonate with them. But the findings from that whole body of work made me step back and say, maybe there's something here that we need to continue. And it was actually Becky Bass, who, as some people may know, was considered the mother of intrusion detection and a luminary in our field. And Becky came to my dissertation defense, surprised me to support me. And after the defense, she said, you need to do something with this. You can't just let this sit on the shelf. And that's when the idea for Sightline came to be.
Wow. And I suppose I already know the answer to this, but how prepared are nonprofits generally?
It's surprising. there's a lot of nonprofits that have some of the early stages of saying, you're doing the right things, you're thinking the right way. Are they where we as security professionals would want them to be? No, but I'm not sure many organizations would be anyway. What I love about the way we approach this problem from Sightline's perspective is that we go in with humility and just an open mind and say, instead of going in thinking, oh my gosh, you don't have resources, you're not going to care, this is not going to be top of mind for you, you're going to have outdated technology. Instead of going in with all of that baggage at the get-go, we go in with a clear slate, a clear mind, and we say, tell us about yourself. What are you doing? And our Kickstart program actually helps them measure against the NIST cybersecurity framework in a way that also prompts us to ask better questions so we can help guide them down this path in a way that makes sense for them instead of just kind of these cookie cutter checklists. And in that process, we're gathering some great information and we get to celebrate those successes with them. Because I have to tell you, watching a nonprofit organization be recognized for saying, oh my gosh, you're doing something right and you're actually falling in lines with the controls of the NIST cybersecurity framework and you didn't even know it, let's take a moment and celebrate. They are amazed. And that empowers them to say, oh, okay, what can we do next? What else can we find that we're doing well?
Yeah. And it's interesting, talking about nonprofits having limited resources, they just can't go through some of the same processes as others. I was just before we started this podcast, I was watching a cybersecurity office hours with Wendy Nather and Tara Wheeler, and talking about Wendy Nather's security poverty line idea. The idea that there's a lot of stuff in these checklists and standards that would be nice to do for some of these organizations, but they have to be Wendy was saying they have to be absolutely brutal about what they choose to do and what they choose not to do. I think anybody who's been in cybersecurity for a while has some sense that there's, stuff that moves the needle and stuff that just doesn't, that just security products, tools, processes that just create busy work. Sometimes it has to be there for compliance, for regulations, but even some of the stuff that doesn't, I suspect we're either conscious of it or we suspect a lot of that could be cut out and it would just have no negative impact, but, it never had any positive impact either. So, how do you do that? Have you come up with, do you have to come up with a new checklist with a new approach for these organizations, or is it something you have to do custom for each one that you work with?
That's a great question. Well, and it's funny that you mentioned Wendy's, the initial thought around security below the poverty line. I actually contributed to her initial blog post or white paper that she wrote about that. And since then, when we were at RSA last year, it was funny because I said to her, I'm wondering if this notion of the poverty line is what prohibits some organizations to even step into improving security because they already feel like a failure because they're below this poverty line. So Wendy and I had a great sort of maybe next generation thought process going about what we could do there. But in terms of what I've seen at Sightline in my work with nonprofits, it's really interesting. So the NIST cybersecurity framework, which is the framework that we primarily use at Sightline, that and the CIS controls, they're written for these organizations to be able to disseminate to lots of people, right? NIST does it so that they can reach the masses. And that's fantastic. But one of the nuances that we're pulling out of Sightline is, how does the language matter? So I've actually redesigned the NIST cybersecurity framework into nonprofit language. And so we can use that to get people going on this journey in a way that they're not spending time Google searching, what do you mean by this? Or that doesn't relate to our type of business. And it's been really interesting because, again, I think part of the spirit of Sightline is that we know that we're trailblazing. We know that we're going into this wanting to discover things we didn't realize we didn't know at the time. And some of that is saying, okay, well, we can put together a checklist, but we may have to change it like a lot. And in nonprofits, what we're seeing a lot is that security and how you talk about it, where it's prioritized, what they need and what they don't need, varies wildly by mission. And so instead of bucketing nonprofits all as one big giant group, we're looking at what does it mean if you are local? What it means if you're national or international? What does it mean if you help children versus help puppies? If you are in the crosshairs of nation state attackers, it's all very, very different. But I think, we all kind of gravitate to thinking about nonprofits as just one big ball of stuff. And it's really not. So we're unpacking a lot of that at Sightline. It would be nice if we could do checklists, but we do a lot. I just don't find it helps them get there. And they're like, well, I can get that anywhere. We want somebody who's going to get to know us.
Exactly. The checklists are already out there. The value that you're providing is you can separate out what really matters from what doesn't, specific to them and children, puppies, whatever their scenario is. Now, I kind of intentionally, I didn't read up too much on how Sightline works. I had a bunch of questions, but I thought, why not just ask them on the podcast if I'm going to ask them anyway? But how do nonprofits find you, and how do they get helped by you? I imagine there's some way for them to maybe submit a proposal or something like that. I don't know, even like trying to get a grant or something like that. I imagine it's maybe not that intricate, but they've got to have some way, like, here's who we are, here's what we are, here's why we need help, and then you have to figure out, are they a right fit for you guys? I imagine you probably can't take everyone who needs help, so you have to choose somehow. So how does that whole process? How does somebody come to get helped by Sightline?
It's pretty organic right now. We've been really fortunate that a lot of nonprofits that have come to us directly. So they hear about us and they just reach out. And sometimes it's a board member that will search out or seek us out. Lots of times it's referrals from other nonprofits. Nonprofits, we're sort of in our own little clubhouse. Sightline is a nonprofit specifically so that we could be like our members. So when I started the organization, that was a very conscious choice, was to set us up as a nonprofit. So that's been kind of interesting to see how people are coming to us. We're also trying to go where they are. So I love going to the nonprofit conferences to say, where's this all fitting in with you? And actually talking to the vendors, the technology vendors that are supporting nonprofits, because I'm curious to understand their layers of security when dealing or offering services to these nonprofits. That helps inform us as well. But what we offer at Sightline currently, we've got some really great plans ahead for 24 and 25 if we have funding for it. But we have two really great sort of entry points for members right now. One is our member forum. So we have a discourse forum that is free for nonprofits to join us, and we provide updates. We talk about patches. We talk about new questions in our Kickstart program, which I'll tell you about in a minute. And we just try and build that community space, because the word that I was, some of our members kept saying to us, it's great that there's all these security conferences. It's great that there's all this stuff that we can go be a part of, but that's not us. And we don't play like those other companies. We're not like the for-profit space. We want a space that's just for us. So we created this member space that's free and available for anyone who's a nonprofit. The other thing we offer to help organizations get started is our Kickstart program. We take that modified version of the NIST cybersecurity framework. We walk them through about a 6-week journey of discovery of where do you measure against the NIST cybersecurity framework. And then they end their Kickstart program with a roadmap of improvement. But the roadmap is actually built in partnership with them. So instead of us just going in and saying, these are all the places that you are really, really not doing well, go fix them, we actually walk them through it, and we do it in the context of their business. So we spend time getting to know them. We look at documents. We do lots of public searches. We do a series of questions. And we take all that information, we distill it down, and we measure them against the framework. And then we have a conversation. And that conversation, that outcomes report, that is the biggest wow, because that's where we celebrate things are doing great and that they should sort of take to the next level, and where we can talk about things that they want to prioritize so that they have the building blocks for better security down the framework. So we do a lot of conversations around, if you do it, this part of the framework and the controls, you'll be better prepared to address these other elements of the framework. So our Kickstart program right now has been amazingly successful. Every organization walks away with not only successes that they get to own of them for themselves, but they get to have improvements that they chose out of that outcomes report to go and do. And they go and do it. And the best part is that many of our members who go through this Kickstart program, as they're going through it, they make changes on the fly. They're like, oh, we need that. We can go do that tomorrow. Can we change our score? So it's been really amazing to watch that happen. Many of these organizations pay for their Kickstarts themselves because it's the only paid service out of Sightline. And we're hoping to build a program where organizations can actually sponsor a Kickstart for a nonprofit of their choice. So coming ahead will be how we help organizations move from the next part from Kickstart down the path.
So help me understand, like once you decide to work with an organization, you do a Kickstart or something like that, who is working with them? Who actually helps them? Are these people that work for Sightline or volunteer for Sightline?
It is me and a couple of others. We're a small and mighty group, but it's primarily me, which you can imagine is hard to scale. So one of the things that I'm excited about building out for the next year and a half or so is a volunteer program for security professionals who want to partner with Sightline. And we would train you in how to become a facilitator of our Kickstart program. And I tested out this model a little bit when I built a graduate class on Sightline Security on our business model, so that graduate students could actually walk in the steps of how we do this with a nonprofit in the area. And it was really exciting for me to see and for the students to see, how do you hand over the reins for someone else to help facilitate folks through this process? But the other question you asked was how we vet nonprofits. You know, we do some research on our end too. We have pretty much a great policy of, if you are a registered nonprofit, you know, that's number one, of course. And, you know, if we do our due diligence and we sort of research a nonprofit and we can't really get a good gauge on if they have a mission of something that could be offensive or concerning in any way, we will dial back and probably offer them space in our member forum, join our member forum before we do a Kickstart. But knock on wood, every single nonprofit that has knocked on our door, we've been able to service with a Kickstart if they have been able to afford it.
That's great. That's great to hear. And what have you seen in terms of, you know, this could almost be a question for our next interview. We're talking with someone from Keith from SecureWorks who studies cybercrime. But how big is cybercrime for nonprofits? I know like for a lot of people, the idea of attacking a nonprofit, seems like a really crappy thing to do. Though I'm not sure a lot of the cyber criminals really distinguish the type of organization that they're going after. As long as they have cyber insurance or they have some means of paying a ransom, I imagine they become a target.
Yeah, it's becoming a big deal. A lot of these organizations that are reaching out to Sightline, sometimes it's because they've had an incident. And that will spark them to say, hey, maybe we should actually understand this a little bit better. But I think the attack landscape is broadening, and nonprofits are going to be, one, caught up in the web or caught up in the net, right, of those attacks because they rely so heavily on third-party resources to be able to function. And, whenever we do a Kickstart, the first thing they say is, oh, Kelley, you're going to tell us not to use all of our favorite tools. And I said, no, that's not what we're here to do. But what we're here to do is to help you understand, to prioritize what are those third-party tools, what data do you have flowing in them, and how do you know if that third party gets hit with an attack? How does that affect you, and are you ready for it? So we see sort of this kind of duality of nonprofits and this problem around third-party risk, and with nonprofits who have to worry about targeted attacks. And that is a very different flavor. And when we do a Kickstart for organizations that we can tell by their mission, during my dissertation, a lot of the organizations I was researching were in human trafficking. Then you have to look at the attacker landscape quite a bit differently. But it's interesting because we do include this in our outcomes conversation with them, because we want them to have a realistic sort of sense of, where are the bad guys? Like, what do I have to be afraid of? Because I'll tell you, I had one executive director of a very small nonprofit, but it was mighty. It had a great mission. And she's like, okay, ransomware people, come on and get me. I mean, we were on a Zoom call and she was just like egging on. She's like, come on and get me. And I'm like, you don't want to egg anyone on to come and get you in this respect, because it not only can affect time and resources, so it disrupts mission. That's the difference with these attacks against nonprofits. You're talking about disrupting mission, not only impacting finances, potentially impacting donors, impacting other things, reputation, but you are impacting mission. So when a nonprofit gets hit, that means that whatever services they provide to a local community or a global community, that stops, or that gets circumvented in some way. And that is what matters for these organizations, is their mission, always.
So Kelley, so that was one really good example of how perhaps a nonprofit would approach cybersecurity in this wonderful training you're giving them, how that's different from an end user perspective in a corporation. And I know you've worked with big corporations as well. What are some of the more surprising things that you've found? Because I would imagine when you're going into these nonprofits, many of them don't have an IT team, much less a security team. So what are some of the happy surprises that you found in addition to this enthusiasm?
They're recognizing that social media is such a strong tool for them, for their mission, for reaching out to the communities, for getting donors. But every single nonprofit that we've worked with, and I always have to pause to say, is it really every single? It's my PhD coming out. Every single nonprofit that we've worked with has that sort of spidey sense when it comes to social media. So they have the right controls set up, which is fantastic. They have policies around it, and they've trained their people. And that, to me, was one of the biggest things that I walked in doing this work initially thinking, they're just using social media willy-nilly. Mm-hmm. So that was really exciting to see. The other thing is that they are not as trusting as people would assume them to be about making sure that others are taking care of them. So if they have a relationship with a credit card company or their bank, they are setting up the alerts for themselves to make sure that they are protecting those assets more than I expected to see them do. So those are really exciting examples. But they're just, it's so much more than enthusiasm, because what we're recognizing in our work, and this is where for Sightline to kind of stay present with them and to be with them on this journey where the value comes, is that early on when we started the Kickstarter, we just went in kind of with all of our security vernacular, even though it was massaged and redesigned for nonprofits, it still wasn't hitting the mark. And one of the biggest ahas for us that's made a huge difference with our members is that we talk about security as it relates to business operations. We talk about the value, not just in protection from the boogeyman under the bed, but we talk about it. How does that inspire more donors? How does that make sure that your mission never gets disrupted? How does that encourage more volunteers to want to participate with you? Like, what stories can they tell by being on this journey towards better security? And that's where they're starting to step in and going, we want to tell people that we have, all this great metrics around the NIST cybersecurity framework. They want to go out and show that they're on the path. They may not be perfect in the eyes of everybody else, but they're on the right path and they're thinking about it. And that's huge. And that comes from them really stepping back and saying, how does this operate in our business, not just protecting us against the boogeyman?
That's fantastic. It sounds like they're recognizing that, first of all, perfection is unattainable, but every step that they take makes them a little bit better. And maybe if we could migrate some of that attitude to the more corporate world, that would be helpful as well.
Yeah, and it actually sparked for me, Katie, when I did my dissertation proposal and I put this out to my committee, they were the first ones that said nonprofits will never want to do this. They'll never participate. I hope you have a backup plan for your dissertation. And I said, okay, I accept the challenge, and I don't believe that's going to be the case. What number of nonprofits do I need to fill out my little survey for my dissertation? What number do I need to sort of move along in this process? And staff at the time said 56. He just kind of threw out a number. And I said, all right, you're on. I sent out 500 surveys through 2 national organizations. I got 222 back.
Wow.
222 out of 500. So that was the first indication to me that, oh my gosh, nonprofits are stepping up and saying, I think we should think about this. And how do we do this? And so that started sort of this mindset, but where we've evolved to, thanks to the lessons we've learned and how we've seen them really in their true form when it comes to security, is that they're doing these things. They're doing things already in line with security controls. We just need to draw it out and use that as momentum to keep them going and to keep them thinking about it. So it becomes muscle memory, becomes part of the operations, and not as a special event they do in October.
Yeah, nice. And that's yeah, I love that. I love that challenge. Assuming those were academic folks, nonprofits are never going to go for this. I love that. Okay, let's find out. Let's do this. I've done a lot of that during my career, where it's like lots of people can throw out assumptions, but I mean, the data's out there. You can gather the data and find out, and put those assumptions to the test. So it makes me happy that you did that. And
Thanks. Well, I think that's one of the big things about the work that we're doing at Sightline. We are working to debunk the assumptions about nonprofits and cybersecurity. At every corner we find them.
Yeah, and that's great. So speaking of nonprofits, your nonprofit, how will people find you? How can, if somebody wants to donate to Sightline or engage Sightline, needs your help, what are the best ways for people to find you?
Great way to find us, of course, is our website, sightlinesecurity.org. We are looking for a sponsor for our member forum so that we can hire some folks to help monitor that and bring more nonprofits into our community space. And we're looking for sponsors to help other nonprofits do a Kickstart who can't afford it. And so, and for nonprofits, if you're a nonprofit organization, come on over. As we say, anyone who knocks on our door becomes part of the Sightline family. Even after a Kickstart, you're in forever. And I think that's probably an adage from when I met Becky Bass, who always welcomed everyone into her family, her professional family. If you're in security, you're always in that family with her. And so I carried that on in the Sightline world. So nonprofits are all welcome. Just reach out to us through the website. Find us on X. I keep wanting to call it Twitter, but find us on
You can
X.
keep calling it Twitter. We do.
Or you can reach out to me. It's very easy, Kelley at sightlinesecurity.org.
Awesome stuff. Thank you again, Kelley. Thank you so much for joining us on Enterprise Security Weekly today. I was really happy to talk to you about this and to spread the word about what you're doing.
Thanks so much. It's been a lot of fun. Always lots of fun things to talk about. So can't wait to do it sometime again soon.
Yeah. Let us know when you're ready to start signing up folks to help. I forget what you called that process, but when you're ready for that, maybe we'll have you back and can promote that so you can get some help.
That would be wonderful. I would love it.
Awesome. All right, stay tuned. When we come back, we're going to talk cybercrime insights with Keith Jarvis from SecureWorks.